Hi, zoology. Okay, we are going to do our notes for our sixth phylum. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And find it. Just kidding. I never know where it is. Okay, there it is. All right, so this phylum is Phylum Arthropoda. There's actually a lot going on with it. So this is kind of going to be a long set of notes, sorry. Arthro, if you think like arthritis, arthritis is problems with our joints and our hands and our knees. So arthro means joint, and pod, P-O-D, poda, that means foot. So all of our Phylum Arthropoda, one of their distinguishing characteristics is going to be jointed feet or jointed appendages. Oh, wait, went too fast. Okay, I went way too fast. So, like I said, jointed foot, that is the distinguishing characteristic of this phylum that we're looking at. But something else that's really interesting is that they make up 84% of the entire animal population on Earth. And that's like a really significant amount. But it makes sense when we think about things like ants and bees are a part of this phylum. So there are tons and tons of ants just in one single anthill, let alone around the entire world. There are about 1 million different species that we've known and come across, so they are very, very diverse. So the Phylum Arthropoda, they have been around for 500 million years. They're very, very successful. Obviously, they've populated a lot of the Earth, being 84% of our entire animal species or animal population. So there are 3 characteristics that really put them above all of the other ones, makes them outcompete a lot of the other organisms. So those 3 things are the exoskeleton. So it's this hard casing around the organism. What that allows for is it acts like a tough armor to protect the organism. But not only that, it also allows for organisms that are on land to maintain their body moisture levels, so it prevents dehydration. So they're not stuck like worms that are stuck in moist areas in the underground. They can actually come out and live in different environments. So that exoskeleton is a really big improvement. Along the same lines, the jointed appendages, so having legs that are able to move in different ways allows for faster escaping, better movements, allows them to diversify in different environments as well. And our third thing that made them super, super, super successful is the segmented body regions. So they will have a dedicated head region, a dedicated thorax, and then a dedicated abdomen, all that have different functions. So the head controls the body, the thorax does digestion, the abdomen is for reproduction. So they no longer have to devote their entire body to all of these things. They can just devote different sections, which leads us into different development and different biological evolutions in that. So they've gotten a lot more successful than just our everyday worm. So there are 3 things, and there's one extra one that I'm probably going to put at the end that I didn't talk about in the slides, sorry. But one of the things is respiration. So because organisms in Arthropoda have such different environments that they can live in, they have different ways to breathe. So if they are an aquatic organism, like lobsters or crabs, they're going to have some gills. I mean, that makes sense, right? Our terrestrial arthropods, like our insects, they are going to have these things called tracheal tubes, and they're little holes on the sides of their body, which allows for oxygen to come in and CO2 to leave. And then the spiders are going to have things called book lungs, which are stacked like how gills are, but they act more like lungs, where they do the gas exchange that way. As far as circulation is concerned, they have an open circulatory system, which is very different than what we have. We have what's called a closed circulatory system because all of our blood is contained within blood vessels. So what happens in an arthropod is the blood goes from the heart and just into open space, is absorbed into the tissues, and then that gas exchange happens there as well. Fun fact, if you ever end up having like fleas or other kind like ant infestation in your house, you can buy what's called diatomaceous earth, and you can spread that on your carpet, and it actually kills off all of the ants or fleas or whatever you have that's invading your house. And this is how it works. So diatomaceous earth is actually crushed up seashells, and these crushed up seashells are very sharp, but on a very microscopic level. Or a very small level. It feels like powder in our hands, but if you look at it, they're very sharp and jagged edges. And what this does is when ants or fleas or whatever crawls over it, it actually cuts open their exoskeleton, and then because they have an open circulatory system, they just bleed out and die. And then you just vacuum your carpet and you take all of their body carcasses and dump them in the trash can. And then their digestive system, it's a complete digestive system, so it means it goes from mouth to some intestines to an anus, and they have different sets of mandibles, which is their mouth parts, depending on what they eat. So if they're a carnivorous organism, they are going to have more sharp pinchers, and if they're more of a nectar drinker, they're going to have more of a straw-like structure. I know flies have like a sponge-like structure on the end of their mandibles, which allow them to soak up a bunch of stuff. Okay. So the classes. So there are a bunch of different classes, and some of the classes we're actually going to talk about in terms of their order, so we're going to get even more specific. So the first class is class Insecta. What defines them as insects is 6 legs. If it has more than 6 legs, it's not an insect. If it has less than 6 legs, it's not an insect. There are 6 orders of class Insecta that I want you to know. So order Odonata, that is the dragonflies. Order Coleoptera, that is the beetle. And I always think of Coleoptera because it kind of looks like Cleopatra. And Cleopatra makes me think of scarabs, and scarabs are beetles. So that's how I remember that one. Beetles are known to have a hard outside shell and then a second set of wings underneath. So they open up their wing or open up their shell and then like fly off. Think like ladybugs and June bugs. Order Lepidoptera. So if you notice with Coleoptera and Lepidoptera, they have this ending with the P-T-E-R-A. P-T-E-R-A, that means wings. Think like pterodactyl. So Coleoptera, Lepidoptera, all of these things all have wings. The way to remember. So Lepidopteras are butterflies and moths. They are the ones that are going to have the straw-like appendage out on the front. That way they can drink nectar. However, butterflies don't only like to drink nectar, they also like to eat off dead and decomposing organisms and have been known to drink the juices off of dead people. So fun facts there. Also, order Diptera. So Diptera are flies and mosquitoes. I'm okay with flies. I really hate mosquitoes. Order Hymenoptera. I forgot to put on this list, but that also includes ants. So bees, wasps, and ants. Hymenoptera, one of the things that you can really tell is they have a very, very skinny waist. So that area in between the thorax and the abdomen, you're going to have a very narrowed in waist. It's not just going to be one big blob. And then our last one, Orthoptera. The way that I remember Orthoptera is it has a hop in it, which makes me remember grasshoppers and crickets are the ones that are hopping organisms. So that's order Orthoptera. Right. So it will be important for you to remember these orders. That will be on a quiz. So make sure you get them down. I'm waiting for the pictures to load. I have more pictures. There they are. Okay, so class Arachnida. The defining characteristic is they have 8 legs and 2 body regions. So their head and their thorax are actually fused to form something called a cephalothorax, and then they have their abdomen. In the class Insecta, they had 3 body regions. They have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. So if you look at an ant, you can see the head, the abdomen, and the thorax. But in a spider, they only have 2. Well, some of them. So the first order, so there are 4 orders of class Arachnida that I want you to know. Class Areninae, which are the spiders. So this is the class, this is the order in which we're like true spiders, this is what you are. Class Scorpionidae, scorpions. Class Opilions, or order Opilions, order Opilions. Opilions are daddy long legs, so they are not spiders. They're like spider cousins. And even though they look like spiders, they are not. They actually have 1 body segment, so it's not a head, a thorax, and an abdomen, and it's not a cephalothorax and an abdomen, it's just 1 blob. So they always look like just a ball with like really long legs on them. And then the last order is class Acarinae. And this class is the mites and ticks. Or this order, I keep saying class. Class crustaceans. So this one includes crayfish, crabs, lobsters, shrimps, and then also these things called barnacles, which is kind of the outlier because they actually don't move, they're sessile. They are the things that you see attached to docks or the sides of boats or the chins of humpback whales. Those are barnacles, but they're actually a crustacean. Their defining characteristic is they have 2 pairs of antennae, so they'll have like 4 different things popping out of their head. And when we dissect our crayfish, I'll show you those. They have 2 compound eyes, and they have a mandible that moves side to side like this. Their first pair of legs, they've modified to be pinchers or claws for defense and to attack any organisms. They also are good for hunting food. You can tell if a crayfish or a lobster or a crab is right-handed or right-clawed or left-clawed based on which claw is bigger. The bigger claw is the one that they prefer to use. Yeah. And then another fun fact is, even though we think of crustaceans as only being in water, there are actually some terrestrial crustaceans, which are actually the pill bugs, the little roly-polies. They live on land, and one of the greatest things is they taste like shrimp. So if you're hungry and you want shrimp, but you don't want to pay shrimp prices, go to your backyard, dig up some roly-polies, delicious. All right, and then this is our last slide for classes. So class Diplopodia, di means 2, pod means foot. So they have 2 feet for every segment. They are decomposers. They don't bite, but they stink really bad. This are the millipedes. They are very round. So if you look at them, they're going to be very almost worm-like, where how round they are, kind of tubular. But yeah, they're great. I had a bunch when I lived in my first apartment in college, and man, every time I would step on them, they make the house smell so bad. It's gross. I don't know why they stunk so bad. The next class is class Chilopodia, or Chilopoda, sorry, I put an I in there. Chilopoda, they are carnivorous. They like to eat snails or slugs and worms, whatever they can bite. They only have 1 pair of legs for every segment, so they don't have as many. And their bites can be actually really painful. Some of them are venomous, so you could get really hurt if they bite you. These are the centipedes. And unlike the millipedes, who's very rounded, centipedes are going to be more flat. They want to do their best to sneak up on their prey. And then our final class that belongs to Arthropoda is class Meristomata. Meristomatas are the horseshoe crabs. So yes, they're called horseshoe crabs, but they're not actually related to the crustacean crabs. They are a bit different. They have a very, very extensive exoskeleton. They live in deep coastal waters, and they like to eat algae, worms, and clams. Sometimes they do wash up on the beaches when there's like big storms or hurricanes or things like that. But for the most part, they like to live in those deep waters. Yeah. There was one thing that I forgot to mention, and I want you to put it on right here, right before we talked about classes. And this is something called molting. And I'll write that up here, maybe. Molting. Can I like highlight it? That works. So molting, this is when they shed their exoskeleton to grow a new one. And when this happens, they can actually be super, super vulnerable when that happens. So they want to make sure that they're not around anything. They like to hide a lot. When I had shrimp in my fish tank, they would like disappear underneath rocks for like 3 days, and I would just see like shrimp exoskeleton just floating around. I'm like, oh, they molted. If you've ever seen that SpongeBob episode where Mr. Krabs, where his shell cracks and then he gets all that weird like pink and wrinkly, that's what happened. He molted. It happens. That's how they grow. They actually like to stay in big numbers so they can make sure they're taking care of each other, which is super sweet. I need to erase all these annotations. Clear. All right. So that is the end. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, that is the end. Go ahead and make sure that you put a summary at the bottom. And I will see you guys later. Have a great day.